The New York Times, a former newspaper, has unleashed a blistering attack on Donald Trump for talking to world leaders in a manner that was not approved by the New York Times, a former newspaper. In an editorial pretending to be a news story, Times editor Blithering Prevarication III lashed out at Trump for talking on the phone with Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen. The editorial said, quote, "This phone call threatens to infuriate the oppressive thugs in mainland China by making them believe we support freedom and stand against tyranny, a complete reversal of the foreign policy of the last 8 years," unquote. President-elect Trump sent out a tweet describing the call, saying, quote, "Turns out President of Taiwan is a girl. Wonder if she's cute. Some Asian chicks are," unquote. Trump's spokesman, Ivan Ulcer, later issued a clarification of the tweet, saying, quote, "The two world leaders had a wide-ranging conversation about important issues. They discussed whether Chinese checkers are in fact Chinese. They mourned the death of the guy who invented General Tso's chicken, and they plotted an invasion of the Chinese mainland. They look forward to continuing their friendship until everyone dies in a fiery nuclear blast," unquote. The New York Times editorial also criticized President-elect Trump's call with Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte because Duterte is a freewheeling lunatic who once called President Obama a miserable SOB. Trump tweeted after the Duterte call, "Just got a call from some crazy guy in the Philippines or someplace. Wonder if he'd make a good Secretary of State." Trump's spokesman also issued a clarification saying the president-elect and Duterte had a polite conversation, but only reached agreement on the fact that President Obama is indeed a miserable SOB. Finally, the Times launched a powerful attack on Trump's talk with Pakistan's Islamic strongman, Nursultan Nazarbayev, saying, quote, "If this president is going to kowtow to Islamic thugs, we see no reason why Barack Obama can't just go on being president. Midwest voters just wanted to change to Trump because he's a white heterosexual," unquote. Mr. Trump sent out a series of tweets after the Pakistan exchange saying, quote, "Just spoke with Nursultan Nazarbayev, didn't tell him his name sounds stupid because he has a nuclear arsenal. Presidential, exclamation point." Trump's spokesman Ivan Ulcer later made a statement on the call by driving his car into a lamppost at high speed while screaming out the window that we're all doomed. Mr. Ulcer survived the crash and has been offered a job at the Daily Wire. Times editor Blithering Prevarication III continued to rave against Trump, but found that his voice kept getting higher and higher, and he kept growing smaller and smaller, until finally he was only 2 inches tall with a voice like a mouse that no one was listening to. He then woke up in a cold sweat, relieved to find it was only a nightmare, but got out of bed and looked in the mirror, only to discover that he'd become invisible. He then woke up in a cold sweat a second time, only to find he was Dean Baquet, the editor of the New York Times, and all his nightmares were true. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, tipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
All right, I'm here in New York. You can tell by my New York hat. I have to let my friends back in California know that I couldn't hear the audio on that on the opening song, which will become a problem later on. So you might want to work on that. You can see I'm in my hotel room. It looks like a set from Law and Order. It just needs a dead prostitute to flesh it out a little bit. And I'm a little bit under the weather, if you can hear that. So I may lose my voice at some point, but we'll see. Later on, we will have if our technology holds up, we will have our Nobel Prize-winning cultural correspondent Michael Knowles on to join us after the break, where we will lose you 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, we'll lose you on Facebook and YouTube, and you'll have to come over to the Daily Wire to hear the rest. And if you want to watch the rest, you got to subscribe, and then you can be in the mailbag, which is uncomfortable and cramped, but you do get to ask questions. So let me tell you why, stick the stupid hat on, let me tell you why I'm in New York, because it actually is a good story. I always have a lot of family here, a lot of people I love are in New York, so I always have people to see, and it's been a very fun, joyful trip in a lot of ways. But I was invited to come here to speak from the pulpit of the church where I was baptized, a very beautiful, a landmark church in New York. But after the election, certain, let us call them liberal, though maybe that's not the right word, certain leftist powerful people at the church got upset that I was coming because of my politics. I obviously wasn't coming to talk politics. I was coming to talk about our old friend Uncle God, but they got upset because of my politics and said that I shouldn't be allowed into the pulpit. They offered that I could come and speak from another venue after the service, but I turned them down, saying I actually didn't want to come to church and make everybody unhappy at Christmas time. It seemed like it wasn't like a Shapiro thing where I was going to a university where that their job is to spread ideas. I mean, I would hate to think that somebody would come to church who was sick or in trouble or having money problems or something and wanting comfort at Christmas time and would come and find that there was all this controversy surrounding me. But just to let you know that that's what's happening here, and we still have the open-minded, accepting, inclusive left is always with us, even when we are with God. So instead, since I had a lot of time on my hands, I do have the picture of me at Trump Tower. I did drop by Trump Tower. And there I am, just to see if they needed any help with the transition. And, I keep hearing about all the craziness here. The people in Brooklyn are going nuts. And it's all, even obviously with my church, there was all this hysteria. And there's all these left-wingers who are just going absolutely out of their minds about Donald Trump. And you can see it, obviously, in the press. But going outside Trump Tower, where they have to reroute the foot traffic so that only people who are staying in Trump Tower or live in Trump Tower can get there. So you have to walk around it and go across to the other side of the street. Everybody seemed very jolly. Everybody here, of course, New York is just packed. Midtown New York is packed with tourists, packed to the rim. And everybody's being very jolly and very polite in a very upbeat mood. There was one kook outside with an anti-Trump sign, and he really did look like a kook. And other than that, there was just people it was all very exciting to have a president who's living in Midtown Manhattan. So that was really, really interesting, And one of the things about being in New York that I always love, and New York is a tough city for me because I can't stand the noise and how crowded it is, especially at Christmas time. It's very beautiful at Christmas time. But New York does make you love, if you're like me anyway, it does make you love the multicultural fact of America. There's something about New York, capitalism, the fact that people need to make money, so they have to be polite. And you just find everybody being very polite, very lovable, and every other person has a different accent. The Islamic cab driver who took me in from the airport, we came over, there's a famous place where you come over the hill and you just see the Manhattan skyline spread out in front of you. And I just heard him say, "Oh, what a beautiful, beautiful view," And it really is a wonderful picture of multiculturalism at its best and capitalism at its best, because multiculturalism really only works where capitalism is, where people have to be nice to one another in order to make a living. And so this brings me to our old friend, President-elect Donald Trump, and what I'm calling the new China syndrome. I don't know if you remember the old movie, The China Syndrome, where there was a damage to the nuclear reactor core, and the China syndrome was the idea that the core would melt down and go through the earth and come out on the other side of the earth in China. So that was why it was called the China syndrome. So now what we have is every time Donald Trump does something, the media meltdown and go through the earth into China, in this case about China, because Donald Trump took a call from the Taiwanese president, Tsai Ing-wen, and this was supposed to be a horrible violation of protocol, because since the 70s and 80s, there's been this thing called the One China policy, which is not. It's an agreement between China, what was then communist China and is now tyrannical sort of communist China, and Taiwan, free China, that there is in fact only one China. And it didn't say who it was, but it just says that that's the policy. What we agreed to the fact that they agreed to that. We didn't say we agreed with that policy, we just said we agree with that. And so we have limited our relations with Taiwan, with free Taiwan, so as not to upset the thugs who run China. And obviously Donald Trump took this phone call, and whether he did it, you never know with Trump whether he's blundering into something because he doesn't know any better, but he does have this guy, what's his name, Peter Navarro, I think his name, that's his China guy, his China advisor, and he does want to have better relations with Taiwan. And, so this may have been an actual policy move. It was definitely a move to say to Barack Obama, he's done, he's finished. And that is part of why the press is going so nuts about it. So George Suckalopagos has the Vice President-elect Mike Pence on, and he says, well, isn't this a violation of the China policy? And Pence has one of the great responses ever. See if you can play that.
I think the American people are encouraged, rather, George, to see that President-elect Trump is taking calls from the world, speaking to the world. They know he's going to be out there advancing America's interests first with that broad-shouldered leadership that's characterized his entire life. But I think it all begins with relationships, and that was nothing more than taking a courtesy call of congratulations from the democratically elected leader of Taiwan.
So no implications for the one China policy?
Well, we'll deal with policy after January the 20th. This was a courtesy call. And plus, I have to tell you, George, it's a little mystifying to me that President Obama can reach out to a murdering dictator in Cuba in the last year and be hailed as a hero for doing it. And President-elect Donald Trump takes a courtesy call from a democratically elected leader in Taiwan, and it's become something of a controversy. But I think the American people appreciate the fact that our president-elect is taking calls from and reaching out to the world and preparing on day one to lead America on the world stage.
So that had to hurt. That had to leave a mark on old George. It says, Obama goes to Cuba and deals with a murderous dictator and becomes a hero, and Trump takes a call from the duly, freely elected president of a free country. Excellent, excellent response from Trump. And of course, from John Bolton, who is never shy. He was on Fox. John Bolton is my pick for the Secretary of State. For some reason, he seems to have moved from the top of the list. He's still talking to Trump, he says, but he had this to say on the call.
Well, it's ridiculous to think that the phone call upsets decades of anything. But I do think it's important that people understand the President of the United States should talk to whomever he wants if he thinks it's in the interest of the United States. And nobody in Beijing gets to dictate who we talk to. My view has been for some time that we should be upgrading our relations with Taiwan. And I know that's going to cause heartburn in Beijing, but it's a reality. This is a nation of over 20 million people. They have a democratic government, a free press, a free market. They meet all the customary international law definitions of statehood. So when a democratically elected leader calls the President of the United States, I say, you bet he takes the call.
So these are really new voices that we're hearing. We remember how Obama started his presidency, traveling around bowing to people and apologizing to people. This is a new voice we are hearing, and it really is important. And I think that when the media go mad about this thing, partly they're going mad because they've gone mad. Partly they're going insane because they're just now insane. And now they're whining because Trump is using Twitter to get around them, and they keep saying, well, we need a free press. But the thing is, we haven't had a free press. All we've had is Democratic operatives with press cards selling us the Democrat talking points, so that it's a little bit late to whine about a free press. Yes, we want a free press. We want to rebuild a free press, and they're only going to be doing that when they start to hire, when the people like the New York Times, CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN start to hire some conservatives and start to have some balanced reporting. So I don't care about this at all. But let's go back to Bolton, because he talks about the fact that China has been, judging the weakness of our leadership, has been getting increasingly aggressive with Taiwan and making a lot of noise about moving in on them. And so this was a good response.
Honestly, I think we should shake this relationship up. For the past several years, China has made aggressive, I would say, near belligerent claims in the South China Sea. They've declared it to be a Chinese province. They've established a provincial capital. And what that means is they're taking a vast amount of water out of being international waters, or waters where there's a right of innocent passage, and making it into Chinese territorial waters. They're trying to put their hands around the throats of the economies of Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and others. It has a direct impact on the United States. They also think Taiwan's a province. So you want to talk about provinces, China? We'll talk.
I love this guy. I would love to have this guy as Secretary of State. This would be a new chapter for us. But, what he's talking about is the aggression in the China Seas, that this is one of the reasons that Obama's neglect of our Navy has been so important, such a really bad thing to do. You forget, because we're so advanced, we go to the moon and we have these jets flying all over the place. You forget that most shipping, most power is still sea power. And because our Navy is so far advanced, it's so far advanced over other navies, we are set to basically rule the world, to dominate the foreign policy scene for the next 100 years because of our Navy. And Obama has been allowing our Navy to rot while China has been building its Navy up. Not a good thing. So what he's talking about is really important. It's important that we start to take this new aggressive attitude, not a war, saber rattling attitude, but an aggressive attitude. All right, we're coming to the end of our 15-minute break, so we're going to have to say goodbye to Facebook and to YouTube. But come over to the Daily Wire, and you'll get to see Nobel Prize-winning cultural correspondent Michael Knowles, and we'll finish this conversation about what I think Trump is up to.